Welcome to today's webinar, Payments Automation Best Practices for Hospitality Finance Leaders. My name is Mark Brousseau. I'm pleased to be your co-presenter for today's webinar. Today's webinar is brought to you by Data Plus. I have a few housekeeping notes to go over before we officially get started. To ensure call quality, everyone's voice lines have been muted today. We encourage you to ask questions throughout the webinar. To do so, simply use the Q&A tool on your screen to submit your question to me. We'll answer your questions at the conclusion of today's webinar. And finally, an on-demand recording of today's webinar will be made available to all of you within the next few business days. We encourage you to share it with your peers and your coworkers. When we think about hospitality finance, there's no task that is as burdensome, as risky, and as time-consuming as paying suppliers. But there are some strategies that your organization can use to streamline this process, to free up staff time, to mitigate risk, and to even generate some revenue for your AP department. And that's what we're going to discuss today. And to help me do that, I'm pleased to be joined by David Disk, an advisor to Data Plus. Hey, Dave, thanks for joining us.
Good morning, Mark. Excited to be here.
Likewise. So let's take a deep dive into what it is we're going to discuss today. We'll start with a level set, discussing the top challenges that hospitality finance departments face when it comes to paying their suppliers. We'll talk about why it is that paper checks are holding many finance teams back. Then we're going to provide some solutions. We'll show you how embedded payments automation works and how it can integrate directly into your financial management system. We'll lay out the benefits of an embedded payment solution, and we'll even provide you with an action plan for choosing the right embedded payment solution for your organization. But before we do any of that, we wanted to start with a poll question, which is now displayed on your screen. We want to know what percentage of your payments to suppliers are made electronically. All of them? 75% to 99% of your payments are made electronically. Between 50% and 74% of your payments to suppliers are made electronically. Between 25% and 49% of your payments to suppliers are made electronically. 1 to 24% of your payments to suppliers are made electronically, or none of them. All of your payments to suppliers are made via paper check. Take a moment to respond to the poll question now displayed on your screen, and we'll discuss the results in just a moment. So Dave, when you're talking to hospitality finance leaders, just how much progress have they made in electronifying their payments to suppliers?
So I think it's across the board, Mark. We become very dependent on the legacy paper check process. And maybe we just become comfortable with what we've always done. But we do know that the U.S. Postal Service is not as dependable as it used to be, and it's probably not the most efficient process with all of the electronic means. So I see a lot of the back offices still printing and mailing a lot of checks. But there are quite a few that are looking to be more progressive and more secure in their delivery of payments and migrating to more secure digital methods such as ACH, virtual card payments that carry less risk and more security around the payments.
What's the biggest barrier to hospitality companies moving to electronic payments?
I think sometimes the barriers are the connectivity of the platforms, right? You've got banks that offer these services. You've got fintechs. They're using financial management platforms that they have to now connect the platforms to facilitate the program. So there's a technology barrier sometimes. Sometimes complexity, right? Because you might be using different services from different providers. The idea of platform fatigue, the fact that I have to log in here to do check, I do ACH here through a bank portal, and maybe I've got another partner for card. So I think the more progressive companies are looking for suppliers that can provide that all-in-one connectivity in conjunction with their financial management platform.
What percentage of payments to suppliers are made electronically? 2/3 of our attendees, Dave, say that most of their payments to suppliers are made via paper check. 1/3 of our attendees say only between 1 and 24% of all their payments to suppliers are made electronically. Those results don't surprise you, I'm sure, but what would be your single biggest piece of advice to our folks on the line who are looking for ways to drive more electronic payments to suppliers?
I think my biggest single piece of advice is act now, right? Don't wait till you have an event in your business like check fraud or something that causes a risk situation that drives an action. Be in front of it. And I'm not surprised because, when you look at the stats, still about 67% of businesses still make their payments on paper check, which, in my opinion, is surprising because it's costly. It does carry a lot of risk, especially if you're not doing positive pay in conjunction with your paper check mailing. So my biggest piece of advice is act before something happens in your business to minimize your risk.
And many hospitality finance leaders are acting. In fact, payments automation is the number one priority of accounts payable leaders across vertical industries, and hospitality is no exception. The fact is that paying suppliers is particularly challenging in the hospitality space. Many hospitality companies have a high volume of invoices across multiple properties that they must approve and post and manage, and of course, pay. And all those manual workflows associated with paper checks and semi-automated payment processes drive up costs. They drag down employee time. 84% of the typical accounts payable practitioner's day is wasted manually keying invoice and payment data, shuffling paper and invoice and emails, fixing errors and mistakes, and responding to inquiries via phone and email about where things stand in the process. And as Dave alluded to, today, fraud is at an all-time high. It's not just paper check fraud we need to be aware of, although checks still represent the lion's share of fraud losses. Semi-automated processes leave us vulnerable to things like phishing schemes, BEC attacks, and even phony bank account change requests. Outdated payment processes also provide us with limited visibility into our cash flows and our corporate spending. We're never quite sure where things stand. And those disjointed systems that Dave was talking about, that makes it hard to be able to roll up data, to instantly know where things stand in the process. And finally, the fact is your suppliers probably want to be paid electronically, and they certainly want to get rich remittance detail on how those payments should be applied. Today, paper checks that get lost in the mail or delayed, they frustrate suppliers. And having to rekey data or pay someone to do it on their behalf, that's not optimal for suppliers either. And paper checks are really the storyline here. Even when you have a relatively small volume of paper checks, the fact is they're costly, they're risky, and they're really, really outdated. Let's face it, we have better things to do than to print checks, chase down signatures, stuff envelopes, and deal with inevitable reconciliation and escheatment. Checks are also an easy target for fraud and theft. Once they leave our hand, well, we have little control over paper checks. Here in Philadelphia, where I reside, they tell us not to put paper checks in those blue mailboxes that, well, are on every single street corner in our city. Turns out bad actors can buy those keys on the dark web. Last year, we had a series of cases where bad actors were assaulting our mail carriers to steal their keys. We simply don't have control over paper checks once they leave our mailroom. What's more, today's postal service is slower than ever. And so we find that there's many cases where paper checks are delayed. And then once they do clear, well, now we have the headache of having to reconciling them. And particularly if we deal with multiple properties and multiple banks, that can be a really back-breaking process. And we can never be sure where a check stands in the process once it leaves our operation. And of course, we're dependent on the postal service for those high postage costs and for that inefficient delivery. Dave, what would be your single biggest piece of advice to hospitality finance leaders on the line who still are processing lots of paper checks to suppliers these days?
Yeah, my biggest piece of advice is there's been a real shift, especially in the last probably 5-8 years, towards integrated payments, right? To have a provider that can basically optimize, digitize, and reduce the heavy weighting on or dependency on paper checks. So first of all, I look for a provider that's got that capability. And when I think about the evolution of this process, right, it used to be like a file-based process where you uploaded files and exchanged data. And then we've gone through this evolution of API connectivity, which is essentially a real-time, almost like an open phone line between platforms, so they can talk to each other more securely and effectively. So those types of advances have really made the ability to adopt integrated payments in conjunction with a financial management platform very efficient and reduce a lot of the risk and the dependency on outdated processes that you're discussing. And I know a little bit later we're going to talk about embedding, so I'll be quiet on that. But that's another advancement that's really exciting.
If there are going to be cases where we absolutely have to cut a paper check, are there ways to do it more efficiently or more securely?
You know, if you're printing checks in your back office, and we still have a dependency, right? There's a certain number of vendors, mom and pops, whatever, that are still going to require a paper check to be dispersed. But when you have to do those, why do them in your back office and tie up your AP staff to do these kind of menial tasks that can be fully automated or outsourced at a much lower cost? I know the accounts payable network years ago said, what was it, $5.14 to disperse a paper check, right? You can do this through an automation partner for probably less than $2 a check. That includes postage, handling, secure printing and mailing, the integration of positive pay file transfers and things like that just automate the entire process without giving up any of your internal controls. So, you know, for those checks that do have to go out the door, I'd recommend finding a solution provider that could do that type of servicing and free up your back office, right? I mean, we're always looking to do more with less. Here's an opportunity to do that.
And organizations are looking for ways to do more with less. And all these manual processes associated with paper checks and outdated payment processes, well, they hold our hospitality companies back. They limit growth and agility. It makes it hard to be able to adapt to fast changing market conditions. It's hard to consolidate operations across multiple properties when you're dealing with paper and semi-automated processes. Paper makes it hard to control costs and difficult to optimize your working capital, particularly important at a time like this. And when it's time to scale, to grow your business, well, in many cases, those outdated processes require additional staff to print those checks, chase down those signatures, stuff those envelopes, and do all that reconciliation and escheatment. Today, clinging to these outdated payment processes is holding many hotel companies and resorts back. And that brings us to our next poll question, which is about to be displayed on your screen. This time, I want to know, has your organization experienced attempted or actual payment fraud over the past 12 months? Yes, you experienced a successful fraud attack. Yes, you experienced attempted, but you caught it. Not that you're aware of, or you don't track this closely. Take a moment to respond to the poll question now displayed on your screen, and we'll discuss the results in just a moment. You know, Dave, fraud has always been a risk in accounts payable. What makes it different now?
Well, I think think about it. There probably isn't a day that goes by, you know, if you're a leader, a financial leader, that you're not getting a text message, an email, something trying to get you to click a link or do something that's going to defraud a business. So you have to be very vigilant. But I think what's really getting a little scary now is the advancements in AI, right? Because it kind of blurs what's real and what's not, and challenge you to be even more vigilant on the communications, the phone calls, the text messages that you get. And unfortunately, it's amazing the amount of training that we have to do with our staff and our financial staff to guard our businesses and protect ourselves against this type of stuff. I mean, unfortunately, fraudsters work as hard as we do. We work very hard to do good business. They work very hard to do bad business. And, we got to be very thoughtful and ahead of it.
How do outdated payment processes leave us vulnerable to these fraud schemes that you're describing?
Well, as you're aware, Mark, I mean, putting a check in the mail leads itself to washing of checks, getting checks. There's different levels of positive pay that can impact your level of protection. We know that there's certain dollar values that don't even get caught with positive pay. So, there's a lot of risk with the paper checks, as you've discussed. With the other digital payment processes, I think the risk is a little less. It's more around the phishing or someone getting your credentials. And also in some cases, your bank routing information needs to be protected. You got to be careful with that in today's environment. That's one of the reasons that I'm a big proponent of virtual cards, because they're one-time use secure cards that really have the risk of fraud is almost zero on those types of transactions. So those are good transactions. Unfortunately, not all vendors accept card. So then we need to be thoughtful about the other types of payments that we disperse.
50% of our attendees on the line, Dave, experienced attempted payment fraud within the past year.
That's a big number.
And what's really sobering about that number, Dave, is we know that most instances of payment fraud go undetected or unreported. And so as bad as that number is, it's probably understated. So
yes.
What you want to do to try and streamline and secure your payment processes, to rethink the way you go about paying suppliers. And the way we think you should do that is with embedded payment solutions. All right, Dave, what's an embedded payment solution and how does it work?
So what's really interesting is you go back 4 or 5 years ago, you had basically fintechs, in some cases financial institutions, most of the time working in conjunction with a fintech, that were bringing a consolidated payment experience, right? So that we kind of cracked the nut and said, okay, we can facilitate all payments and optimize the digital mix to mitigate your risk. A good thing. But it was one platform sitting on top of another platform. Now with the advancements of APIs and the maturity of this type of connectivity, it opens the door for what's called embedding. So instead of using multiple applications to deliver your payments, with a thoughtful platform, for example, here Data Plus is an example. Data Plus made a decision about 1.5 years ago, which I thought was pretty forward thinking, to embed payments. So instead of working collaboratively side by side with a payments provider, where they're basically transmitting instructions to the payments provider and you're logging into their platform to have the experience, they have mapped into the APIs of a secure payments provider and provide the entire payments experience right within the financial management platform. So the difference is everything happens in the environment that you work. The workflow, the improvement, the real-time visibility of payments, the syncing of vendor records, and the auto reconciliation of payments as they clear, which is very unique. And it's where the market's moving. And over time, I think the majority of payment solutions will run through platforms that are interconnected versus multi-platforms layered on top of each other.
How hard is it to get started with an embedded payment solution? Is there a heavy lift on an IT team at a hospitality company?
Yeah, that's a good question. You're teeing everybody up very well here, Mark. You think about it, in the past, if the financial management platform was not connected or already working with a payments provider of your choice or bank, it required the deployment of an IT project, right? You had to do some connectivity, some integration work, some secure file delivery, which typically was, could be pretty expensive. And a lot of times it was kind of a one-off process. In this case, all the work has been done. All the plumbing, all the connectivity is there. So it doesn't require any IT effort to deploy the program, right? It's basically the click of a button. And in some cases, you're going to have to go through an approval process, just like you would apply for a bank account. You have to go through an application process so we could do our KYC and proper due diligence that we're all respected or required to do, through the requirements of the federal government cascading down to the financial institutions. But the beauty is you can get out the gate very quickly.
What if someone's already using a financial management system that has an embedded payment capability? Is it a matter of turning on the functionality?
Again, it's turning on the functionality in an application process. Yeah, because it's, again, you're enrolling in a program, so you have to go through that process. That's probably the heavy lifting, but that's pretty minor. And then once that's done, it's working with the finance platform to deliver and activate the service, because it's already activated with the payments partner. It's just activating your program, which is very, very light lifting.
So there's a number of payment options that are available through an embedded payment solution. And Dave, I think this is what trips up some finance leaders,
Yeah.
right? We tend to get focused on one particular payment method, but the optimal approach is to leverage them all when it's appropriate. No? Talk to me about that.
Yeah, it's like anything, one size doesn't fit all. We know that there is a segment of vendor population, for example, that will accept a credit card as a form of payment. But in this case, it's much smarter to use a one-time use credit card that kind of resembles a paper check disbursement, right? It's the invoices that you're getting paid rolled up to a specific card number that works one time for an exact amount. So that's very secure. So the vendor runs it for more or less and you've agreed to pay, it actually declines. Once they run it, it goes away just like a paper check, and it reconciles to the check reference number that's associated with that payment. So that's very unique. But we know that not all vendors accept card. There's probably, in the hospitality space, I'd say 22 to 28% of the vendor population is going to accept cards. So that's about a third of your payments that you can very securely digitize. Then we know that a lot of your national and your larger suppliers, especially your large ticket payments, are probably going to be a good candidate for ACH. And when you do ACH, the same thing. You want to be able to send those ACH payments securely. You want to send it with detailed remittance advice. And one of the things that a lot of ACH platforms lack is the ability to reconcile and that visibility of what you get paid for. So the nice thing with the embedded programs with the right payments partners is you can do this type of stuff where you get reconciliation at the ACH level per payment. And then for the remaining checks, which hopefully is a small percentage of the population, let's say 15%, 20%, a lot of them, those kind of local footprints with mom and pops, it's much smarter to outsource that through a print to mail service that's secure, that provides positive pay processing in conjunction with the disbursement of the payments, and just mitigate any risk that you have with those remaining paper checks. And at the end of the day, the goal is to have a completely digital back end in your back office, even though a few of the payments may still be going out by paper check. It's a secure digital process versus a paper-based process in your back office.
We know, Dave, that the goal is to migrate from paper checks, but how do we know if a supplier is willing to accept an ACH or a card payment?
Well, in this case, a payments partner aligned with a financial management platform that has expertise in a core vertical, in this case, Data Plus, who's connected with a payments partner that specializes in hospitality. So you think about hospitality, all hotels pay the same 80 to probably 120 large national vendors, whether it be an HD Supply, a Guest Supply, a Fortessa, whoever it may be. And then you've got your local footprints. So there's already an understanding as to what vendors accept card and how they accept, what vendors accept ACH and how they accept. So the ability to optimize and get out the gate really quickly is really smart with one of those providers. Secondarily, you want to look at a provider that does ongoing vendor enablement. And some of the very good fintechs that are mapped in with these programs have that capability. In this case, the provider Data Plus selected has very good vendor enablement capabilities. They do ongoing enablement. They're very smart about how vendors accept sensitivities with vendors that you may have if you have strategic vendors, as well as if you're participating in buying platforms, for example, like a vendor or iBuy or Buyefficient. We know how the vendors accept and you don't lose or mess with your discounts on those platforms. So again, that level of expertise aligned with the core vertical, I think, is very important. And the fact that the enablement happens ongoing is very important.
Just how widely accepted are these virtual cards? I know I hear a lot of folks fear that suppliers would never accept them because of the fees associated with them. Is that a misperception?
I think that's a myth. I mean, we know vendors accept without fee, because you're paying on paper check. I can promise you for accepting card vendors, there's probably 50 or 100 customers paying them with a virtual card, right? So it's already built into their cost of doing business because they get a lot of efficiency on their back end. They get a secure, guaranteed digital payment. They get automated reconciliation a lot of times on the back end, which is very important. So it brings a lot of efficiency. The other thing that's happened is the card networks have matured quite a bit. And so what it looked like 10 years ago and what it looks like now is very different, because suppliers, when they accept larger payments, can qualify for discounted interchange, or the cost to acceptance goes down. So it incents them to accept more payments. When suppliers pass more data with their card payments, it reduces the risk and reduces the cost. And then there's also unique programs, I'm not going to get into all the details, where you can actually reduce or negotiate the interchange. So there's a lot of maturity in this particular space, and card acceptance is probably as strong as it has ever been.
And by using an embedded payment solution, hospitality finance departments are able to turn supplier payments from a burden to a strategic advantage. Electronic payments through an integrated payables solution that's embedded within your financial management solution allows you to eliminate manual handoffs and rekeying. Everything flows seamlessly, and reconciliation is done in real time automatically. You're able to accelerate payments, but without sacrificing control. You can monitor the timing of payments to suppliers. You're able to boost security with built-in workflows and controls such as user permissions, segregation of duties, systematic workflows, complete audit logging, and encryption of sensitive data. As Dave said, you're able to unlock rebates from qualifying payments that you're already making to suppliers in some cases. Some hospitality finance departments are able to use those rebates to offset the overhead associated with their department. In some cases, turning accounts payable into a profit center. And you're able to maintain a full audit trail and real-time visibility into all your payments. You always know where things stand in the process. You always know what's happening with your cash flows and your corporate spending. Dave, what do you believe is the biggest benefit of an embedded payment solution in the hospitality space?
There's a number of them. One is you never have to leave your work environment to process your payments securely. Two, all those internal controls, workflow, dual approval, payment threshold approval, still apply. Very unique. You get the automated reconciliation. And to your point, Mark, the cost savings is significant. When I heard 50% we're still doing primarily paper check. Well, let's say it's not the accounts payable networks figure it at $5.14, but let's say it's minimally, $2.50, $3 a payment. Now, if you're making tens of thousands of check disbursements a year, you don't realize that's a significant. It's almost the cost. It's probably the equivalent to the cost of an FTE in your back office, just in payment processing costs, not counting the rebate that you're going to earn on a percentage of those volumes. And typically, those rebates could be pretty beneficial as well. Or in Data Plus's case, you give up the rebate, but you get total free payment processing and access to the platform at no cost. So, there's a lot of different flavors out there, but the efficiency and just the cost savings in payment processing is staggering in a lot of cases.
It's a compelling business case. You might be pretty excited about this idea of embedded payment solutions, and you might be ready to start looking at potential options. But we want to warn you that not all solutions are created equal. We want to make sure that you look for a solution that is fully integrated in your financial management system. You don't want loose integration. You want to make sure you can manage all of your payments without leaving your work environment. You want to find a solution that supports all those payment methods from a single platform. So whether you want to pay your suppliers via ACH, card, or check, make sure you find an embedded solution that supports all those options. No one size fits all. You want to make sure that you find a solution that enforces dual control, segregation of duties, logs all actions taken on a payment, provides you with the control you need over your payments. You also want to make sure you find a solution that offers ongoing supplier enablement and payment support. Fact is your supplier base is going to change over time. You want to make sure that you're achieving the optimum results from your electronic payment initiatives, and that can only be done with a continuous supplier enablement. And you want to make sure you find a solution that extends the value of your financial management solution by providing real-time visibility and reporting into your payment processes. Dave, what would be your single biggest piece of advice when evaluating embedded payment solutions?
Yeah, first of all, I'd find out who the payment partner is behind the financial management platform. Make sure it's a solid player that's been in business for a long time. They're SOC compliant and have the security protocols that you would expect. There's a lot of fintechs that are spinning up, right? And you want to make sure that the discipline, the financial viability of what I would call a critical service provider is there to stand the test of time. In the case of Data Plus, they've got a very solid payments provider sitting behind them that does processing for large national banks, super regional banks, and has nearly 20 years experience processing billions and billions of dollars of payments, right? So there's been a lot of learning along the ways. And so I would look for a very experienced provider. Secondly, I would look for a provider that's got experience in the discipline, right? Here we're talking about multi-entity hotel management. It's got a lot of complexity. It's got a treasury management aspect with all these different bank accounts for all the hotels. Very different than, for say, a construction company is doing job costing, and their vendor base would be very different than this vendor base. So again, experience, and then look at the quality of the integration. What does it do? Does it give you a full end-to-end payment process with automated reconciliation, automated vendor flagging, the things that really deliver a true, basically in-platform experience without having to be dependent on other platforms to manage your payments?
That brings us to our final poll question, which is now displayed on your screen. This time we want to know, what is the biggest challenge with the way you currently pay your suppliers? Is it too many manual steps, high processing costs? Is it missed early payment discounts or rebates? Is it poor visibility or reporting? Is it supplier complaints? Is it high risk of fraud? Or is it something else? What's the biggest challenge with the way you currently pay your suppliers? Respond to the poll question now displayed on your screen, and we'll discuss those results in just a moment. So Dave, regardless of the challenge that organizations are facing, what would be your advice to them as they consider embedded payment solutions?
Again, I would look at providers that have a fully automated process. But that automated process also needs the ability to mirror and support your internal controls, right? Because that's typically the biggest pushback. I want to see the check. I want to see the backup. It requires two signers. But it's not very efficient to be taking a stack of paper and putting it on someone's desk to sign the drop in the mail. And I've even seen some situations, believe it or not, where checks are getting printed and a box of checks is getting FedEx to another office for a signature before they go out. So the ability to do this stuff electronically in today's day and age, I mean, it just makes all the sense in the world. And you think about it, we don't do it in our personal life anymore. I think most of us would be hard pressed to think of the last time we wrote a check, right? Almost everything's electronic from a consumer facing perspective. And it should be that way from a B2B facing perspective as well.
I wonder if our kids would be able to find a bank branch or know what to do when they entered one, but that's a webinar for another day. So the message we wanted to leave you with today is that today's payment processes are inefficient, they're costly, they're risky, and they hold hospitality finance departments back. If you want to move forward with confidence, well, there's 5 steps to get started on your way to embedded payments. The first is take assessment of where it is you currently stand. What are the delays and the risks associated with the way you currently pay your suppliers? Next, estimate the cost of those manual processes. How much time, labor, and fraud exposure are your current payment processes really costing you? Next, identify integration opportunities. Find out Does your financial management software provider support embedded payments? If so, that's a great starting point for automation. Next, engage your stakeholders early. This isn't just about accounts payable. It's not just about finance. You want you to be sure to involve frontline AP staff, IT, treasury management, even the CFO to understand where they see as the gaps in your processes and to identify their goals for improvement. And finally, as Dave said, find a trusted partner. Look for a solutions provider with a track record in hospitality and a solution that's completely embedded in their financial management solution. So we want you to find ways to eliminate manual work, consolidate your payment methods to mitigate fraud risks, and to turn AP into a value driver with rebates. And to do that, we believe embedded payment solutions are the way to go. And that brings us to the Q&A portion of this webinar. If you haven't already submitted your question for Dave, or if you've thought of another question for Dave, go ahead, use that Q&A tool on your screen to submit your question to me now. We'll answer as many questions as time allows. Dave, our first question up is from Marie. Marie's wondering, any suggestions for selling senior management on payments automation?
Hi, Marie. Well, thanks for your question. I think the key thing is, right, let's not wait for a major event to happen. We know if you're still putting paper checks in the mail, you have extreme fraud exposure, right? 67% of all fraud occurs on paper checks. I believe the Fed on their website equates a 21 basis point, basically cost exposure for B2B payments on paper check. So it makes all the sense in the world to deliver the payments electronically. What I would reassure them is that they don't lose any of their internal controls. And sometimes you walk before you run. Why wouldn't you test with one property and let them get comfortable with it before you turn on all the payments? Because you have flexibility. You can deliver some this way and deliver some by printing and mailing in your back office, as you still do today. But I think once you get a little exposure to it and they see that they're not giving up control and they've got more security, it'll be a really great win-win. And the other thing is, maybe I ask for some references from other customers that have made this transition. Let them talk to somebody else.
And that will be our final word. Dave, thanks so much for an excellent presentation and for sharing your insights with us today. And thank all of you for taking time out of your busy days to join us. If you're interested in learning more about embedded payments or the embedded payments solution offered by Data Plus, we invite you to contact Doug Barnes at the information now displayed on your screen. On behalf of Dave and Data Plus, this is Mark Brousseau. Thanks so much for joining us, everyone, and hope to speak with you all again soon.